Hey guys, Serendi here. Here is part 2 of What If Ace Was Harry Potter's Reincarnation. Hit like and subscribe, and also don't forget to check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 9. Luffy did his best not to sniffle or cry. It had been several days since Ace somehow got blasted from the ship, and considering the nature of what he was doing at the time, Sabo's guess was that he got sent somewhere else for a bit. He was probably off having an adventure of his own and would find his way home eventually. Luffy had been eager to have an adventure of his own, except he ended up kidnapped. He didn't know how long it had been. All he knew was that the people who had taken him were the sort of bad pirates that Ace told him to avoid at all costs until he was bigger. They didn't care about adventures or freedom. All they wanted was a lot of gold and treasure, even if they had to hurt others to get it. Case in point, they kidnapped kids in order to ransom them or sell them as slaves. Luffy was being ransomed, mostly because he had Whitebeard's mark on his shoulder and had been seen with one of their crew. All he knew was that he wanted Ace right now, or Sabo. He wasn't too picky on who. He was about to fall partially asleep, which was difficult because of the fact he was cuffed in seastone and his leg had a nasty gash on it that looked bad from the lessons Ace had given him. Wounds that had gunk in it and smelled funny needed to be treated quickly before the injury became something worse and they had to take the limb off. Luffy didn't want to lose his leg. It was at the exact moment he was about to fall asleep that he felt it. A familiar thrum in the back of his mind that made his magic dance with glee and happiness. Luffy's eyes shot wide awake. Ace was back. Better yet, he was close. With all the energy he had left in him, Luffy sent out a mental plea for Ace to come quickly. He made sure to focus on his big brother and wish with all his might that Ace was in the cell with him. Those jerks wouldn't stand a chance against his big brother. His prayers were answered. A flash of fire appeared in his cell, along with an annoyed Ace and Jack. Ace blinked at the sudden change of light before he saw Luffy. He took one look at the sea stone around Luffy's wrists and the bad leg, before a pure murderous intent filled the air. But in his eyes, all Luffy saw was love and protectiveness. "Are the ones who did this to you coming back?" he asked quietly. Luffy nodded. Ace gently transferred Jack to his wrist. "Can you put some of your tears onto his leg? I can't gauge exactly how far the infection has spread." Jack trilled, and pearly white tears began to fall on Luffy's leg. Blessed relief from the pain it was in filled him, as Ace used the unlocking charm to undo the cuffs without the key. Luffy didn't care how weak it made him look. He started bawling and quickly wrapped his arms around Ace's neck. Ace hugged him tightly, rubbing his back and letting out that odd crooning noise he sometimes made when Luffy or Sabo had nightmares that said he was there and everything would be okay. Once Luffy's tears weakened a bit, Ace debated on whether to send Luffy ahead or keep him close to see the end of his captors. "Lu, do you think you can handle going straight to Sabo and the others? Or do you want to stay with me while I burn this place to the ground?" he asked. Luffy tightened his arms around Ace. "You want to stay with me?" Luffy nodded. "Okay, baby boy. Just make sure to point out who did that to your leg so I can fry them up extra crispy. Okay?" said Ace gently. "Okay," said Luffy quietly. Luffy kept his hold around Ace tight, so he didn't fall off his brother's back, but loose enough that Ace would have no issue breathing or moving. Hearing the sounds of the people who hurt him, Luffy stiffened. Ace's eyes darkened. It was time to show these bastards why it was never a good idea to tickle a sleeping dragon, let alone harm one of its own. Shit. That brat escaped. He can't have gone too far with that leg of his. Search everywhere. The second the door opened, Ace flash fried everyone within range. Dead silence filled the air, as did the pissed-off, murderous intent of one Ace D. Portagas. Forget Conqueror's hockey. These bastards were going to know exactly how boned they were and remain conscious for every second of it. Ace didn't want them to pass out and miss even a fraction of his anger towards what they did to his little brother. The closer they got to the door, the quicker the pirates realized something bad had descended upon their operation, and it wouldn't be satisfied until each and every single one of them was dead. Luffy whimpered once the sunlight hit his face, before relaxing. He was free, and Ace was back to teach these jerks a lesson. Ace's murderous intent did not extend to the children. He merely directed them to rooms he already cleared before calmly moving them to the next one, so he didn't lose track of them. Considering he was killing all the bad adults, the children were quick to follow orders. Those that attempted to escape on sea soon found that there would be no salvation for them. Ace Flame roasted them in dragon form, before spotting a familiar ship heading their way. Ace kept Luffy on his back as he went into doctor mode and started treated anyone who was being held captive. Considering his dragon fire was hotter than his devil fruit powers, he had stuck to blowing flames onto those who had pissed him off so much. It was a good thing his devil fruit was flame-based because it meant he obtained no damage from the trick. Ace would only find out later that because of it and the fact that several of the people he set free saw his animagus form, that word had spread. Dr. Pyrite had somehow managed to find and eat the mythical dragon devil fruit, much like Marco had eaten the Phoenix version. Ace nearly laughed himself sick when he heard about that, but at least now he had another way to separate himself from his pirate persona. After all, it was well known that a person couldn't eat 2 devil fruit powers and live. Luffy whimpered. It had been almost 2 weeks since he was freed by Ace and he kept having nightmares. Every so often Ace would let him have the special potion that let him sleep without dreams. The only thing that made it all bearable was the fact that Ace had declared that until Luffy was able to sleep normally again, cuddle time had been invoked. Sabo once again declared Ace a total tsundere and glared at his elder brother for punching him. Ace could play the big tough guy, but whenever Luffy needed him, his dear side came out. Every time Luffy woke up from a nasty nightmare of being back there, he would only have to turn his head to the nearest source of warmth to find Ace right there, holding him tightly. And all he would have to do was cuddle against his big brother and let the warmth seep in to fall right back asleep. It was because of that fact that the worst of the trauma caused by his kidnapping was starting to fade a little faster than normal. Ace didn't give a single damn about the fact Luffy was so clingy towards him. Far from it, his mother hen side had already kicked in. Finally, 2 full months after the incident and being freed by Ace, Luffy managed to sleep an entire night without having to use his older brother as a teddy bear. He didn't say a single word about the fact Jack had taken to nesting over his bed to croon just in case he had another nightmare. "So Ace, where exactly did you go anyway?" asked Sabo now that Luffy was on the road to recovery. "An alternate world where I didn't become a doctor but still joined the Whitebeards," said Ace absently. "So, basically what would have happened if I didn't have the extra knowledge I do?" Dead silence. "Are you kidding me?" asked Sabo. Ace turned to look at him. "My alternate watched you die that night you idiotically tried to cut across the Celestial Dragon's ship, and he turned his back on Luffy shortly after, which caused him to become badly injured. He also never bothered to rob Gramps' ship every time he was in port, and he basically ditched Luffy to Gramps' hellish training alone once he was 17. Also, it took 100 days before he finally agreed to become a part of Pop's crew, and he's never had a fishman as part of the Spades." Sabo stared at him. "How the hell did you figure out you were in an alternate timeline?" "Because the first thing I saw when the smoke cleared was my alternate self. They were quick to believe my story when I healed Pops all over again." Sabo snorted at that. "What about me? From what I can tell you were either killed, or more likely considering who we ran into shortly after the Grey Terminal was burned, taken in by Dragon as a member of the Revolutionaries," said Ace. "And if you remember the level of damage done to you, I wouldn't be shocked if you lost your memories at the very least." Sabo winced at the reminder. Ace had thoroughly chewed his ass out for going in front of the Celestial Dragon's ship. "So how did you get Luffy to stop having nightmares?" asked Sabo. "Told him once he was able to sleep properly in his bed for a week I'd get him started on animagus training. Fun fact about magic. It's not hindered by seastone cuffs," said Ace. Ace had held a seastone necklace in his hand, and showed Luffy how his arm still turned scaly and dragonish despite the draining effects seastone had on him. Knowing that the animagus transformation, even a partial, would allow him to still be able to fight even with a seastone cuff had helped Luffy's nightmares immensely. Luffy and Sabo were trying hard not to snicker at the expressions on the other pirates' faces when they realized what it was that Ace was humming under his breath. At some point Ace had introduced the concept of musicals to the crew to kill the boredom of sailing on the sea. It had taken off pretty quick, likely because one of the first ones he introduced them to was Les Miserables. The plot alone had gotten their interest, never mind the actual songs. The source of the brothers' amusement was the fact Ace was making a lot of meat pies, and several of the other crew members had gone missing earlier and no one could find them for hours. Why was this amusing, one might ask? Ace had just put on a new musical called Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street, and the song he just so happened to be humming while cooking the same pies from the musical was A Little Priest. Considering the content of the musical the night before and the fact certain members of the crew were missing, well, one could hardly blame some of the more paranoid members of the crew for freaking out a little bit. Seeing Luffy eating the meat pies with a gusto, when the crew had seen Ace cut up some unidentified meat, made a few others look a tad green. "All right, Ace, Where did you stash the missing crew members? Demanded Thatch, a bit amused at the others' reactions. So few people believed cooks to be threats. He found it hilarious to see the other members of the crew giving him wary looks while butchering meat after hearing that musical. I may or may not have bribed Aizu with the agreement he could take me out on a shopping spree for some new clothes after my favorite shirt developed a hole I didn't feel like fixing so long as he could hide a couple of the more annoying idiots, said Ace cheekily. Thatch guffawed. You are evil. Can you blame me for having fun trolling the rest of the crew? Said Ace cheekily. A week later, when they made port, Ace honored his agreement with Aizu by letting the man drag him from store to update his wardrobe. Since Ace's alter ego dressed a bit nicer than his pirate one, Aizu made sure to take Ace to some of the nicer stores. On the Moby Dick, Aizu was in a very good mood after the minor shopping spree. The change in Ace's appearance with the proper clothes was shocking. If Aizu didn't know any better, he would think Ace was the son of a well-bred noble. A minor haircut to clean up the split ends and dragging Ace to clean up his nails had also straightened up his appearance. Very few of the crew bothered to learn anything about makeup or making themselves more presentable. Ace, on the other hand, tended to humor Aizu when it came to makeup and other little tips. The older man had been delighted when Ace came to him for help to learn more about hiding his freckles and using foundation. He had made do with half-learned lessons from Makino back on their home island before. Ace now had a small makeup bag filled with quality supplies that wouldn't clog his pores or leave any discolorations. Ace, what the hell did Aizu do to you? Asked Sabo, twitching. If he didn't know any better, he would swear Ace was of noble blood, rather than the son of the Pirate King. You don't like it? Asked Ace. Shishishi. Ace looks like a real professional, said Luffy proudly. Ace gently ruffled his hair. Just wait, Lu. You'll be the next one to go with Aizu to get some new clothes. Luffy looked at Aizu. Can you make me look as nice as Ace? He asked curiously. Aizu beamed at him. I don't see why not. I've always been curious to see what you would look like without that scar under your eye anyway, said Aizu. Chapter 10. You're not going to start bawling because Luffy is finally setting off on his own now, are you? Asked Sabo suspiciously. Hell no. I may be getting blackout drunk with Shanks and Pops later though, said Ace sheepishly. Sabo snickered. It was the big day. Luffy had just turned 17, and as agreed he was setting off on his own to become a pirate captain with Pop's blessings. Luffy kept getting congratulations and all sorts of often useless advice, but Ace kept getting commiserating looks from the rest of the crew, especially those who had families out there. Everyone knew Luffy was Ace's baby. Ace was such a mother hen sometime around his little brother, and treated him more like a son than a sibling at times. If the age gap were a little bigger, Shanks had little doubt Luffy would have been calling Ace Papa instead of him. Still, Ace had prepared his baby brother as best he could for the big day, though he did get a tad misty-eyed when he realized the day Luffy was finally setting off on his own was drawing far too close. Though Ace still smirked when he remembered Shanks' expression upon realizing that the fire user had given Luffy an actual ship for his birthday, even if he had remodeled it slightly since he had spare time and a decent workshop. Shanks had been so peeved because it was going to be a pain in the ass to top that sort of gift. He had settled on sharing sake with Luffy to signify that whatever crew he came up with would be allies with the infamous red-haired crew. Pops had opted to give Luffy a spare flag in case he ran into trouble once he reached the Grand Line again, and the knowledge that if something happened, he and his crew would always be welcomed as part of the Whitebeard Pirates. Luffy might wear his tattoo on his left shoulder with pride, but he also wanted to make his name known to the bigger players before he let people know he was one of Whitebeard's sons. After all, if the Marines knew one of the Whitebeard pirates had struck out with Pop's blessing, they might send the bigger guns after him and wipe out whatever fledgling crew he could create. Do you have everything? Asked Ace. It was hard to believe they were back on Dawn Island, but Luffy was adamant about starting out from the very bottom. The irony being that Luffy was likely to overpower any real players in the East Blue, since very few even knew what hockey was, much less had any training. And that was before Luffy started dipping into his more shocking bag of tricks when it came to his magic. Ace still wasn't sure why sharing his blood with Luffy and Sabo had given them magical abilities, but he wasn't complaining overly much. Do you have the romance dawn? Asked Ace. Luffy proudly pulled out the odd bottle Ace had given him once they reached Dawn Island. Inside was a ship gently rocking on the limited amount of water inside. Closer inspection revealed it was the Romance Dawn, shrunk to the size of a model ship. Ace had waited until they were back on Dawn Island to shrink it into the bottle, because they had used it to get past the comm belt. Since he did have free time, Ace had made the ship far superior to anything found on the East Blue, including the special coating that allowed the ship to go underwater however briefly, and the seastone coating to deal with any sea kings they ran into. The medical bay was fully stocked, the galley was cleaned, and the freezer was fully operational. Inside the captain's quarters was the old flag belonging to the Spade Pirates. It hung on the ceiling above the hammock. Several pictures hung on the walls with Luffy in various scenes with his brothers, the Whitebeard pirates and the red-haired pirates. The navigator's room held everything that one would need to survive the Grand Line until Luffy reached the best shipwrights in paradise. Thanks to Ace's witchcraft, the ship could hold at least 20 people comfortably and enough food to keep the black hole known as Luffy's stomach happy for a month. Ace couldn't wait for Luffy to discover the other surprise. He had left the dusk to dawn hidden in the cargo hold, and Luffy knew how to pilot it using the special runes engraved on the box that heated the air up to make it fly. Shanks was going to cuss him out good once he found out that was left on the ship. And all Luffy would have to do was break the bottle near the water to release the Romance Dawn from inside. Right before Luffy got on the tiny ship that the mayor had said he could use once he started his journey as a pirate, he dashed back towards Ace. I'm going to miss you, Ace and I. Ace would adamantly claim he was not crying his ass off when he hugged Luffy back, and he would smack Sabo for any claims to the contrary. At least he knew Coral and Finn would find Luffy sooner rather than later. They were currently investigating something for Jimbei regarding an all-fisherman crew in the East Blue. Watching Luffy get sucked into a whirlpool, Ace had to groan. Only Luffy would fight off a sea king on his first day as a real pirate only to get sucked into a whirlpool. Do you think he's okay? It's Luffy. Everyone knows the gods protect fools, small children, and people who don't know when to give up. Sabo thought that one over and snorted in agreement. Sabo looked at the small slip of paper he kept safe in the bracelet on his wrist. It looked perfectly ordinary, but those who knew what it was would identify it as a Viver paper. This one was tied to Luffy. Ace had them made for all three of them, as well as Coral and Finn. Sabo had called him a mother hen, but they all appreciated having a way to tell the condition of everyone else just at a glance. Considering it was still intact, Sabo could only conclude the little idiot was fine and likely having the time of his life. Sabo looked at Ace. Ace looked right back. So, as we agreed then? Just remember to call regularly, said Ace. Sabo wanted to join the revolutionaries, but had agreed to hold off until Luffy set off on his own. Now that Luffy was about to become a proper pirate captain, Sabo was going to meet up with Dragon, who happened to be Luffy's biological father. You have my snail number memorized. For the love of the gods. I pity the others when you get back if your mother hen tendencies have been overclocked because Luffy just set off. You take that back. Never, shouted Sabo. The two went at it like idiots, but there wasn't any real heat behind their punches and kicks. Just their way of reassuring each other that no matter how far they were apart, they were still brothers. Ace was visiting with Shanks when Mihawk happened to show up with a new bounty poster. The grin on Ace and Shanks' faces couldn't be wiped off with a sandblaster. Yes, that little idiot is already kicking ass and taking names, and it hasn't even been a month, cackled Ace. What's his crew name? Asked Shanks just as eagerly. The Straw Hat Pirates, officially, said Mihawk. Shanks was already crowing about the name, partially because he knew what inspired it. Let's party, cheered Shanks. That set off his crew, who cheered with him. Ace was already bringing out the snail and dialing up his little brother. The mood got even more upbeat when Yasopp found out his son Usopp had joined Luffy's crew as the sniper. You could hear the pride in his voice as he talked to his son over the snail. In the East Blue, on the merry-go, Nami was staring at the two hammerhead fishmen, incredulous. You actually want to let them join the crew? She demanded. Considering her past history with fishmen, it was understandable why she wasn't happy. Shishishi. Finn and Coral already told Ace and I that they'd join my crew so that they could keep an eye on me for him. Besides, Finn is a registered surgeon and Coral is really good at scouting. How did you meet the captain? Asked Zoro. His brother basically abducted us from an island that discriminated against us for our species. Then Finn found out Luffy's brother was the same doctor that he had been fanboying about for months, and Ace agreed to train Finn as a surgeon, said Coral. Though I still don't know how they fooled the Marines long enough for Finn to get his license. Shishishi. So you told his brother you'd keep an eye on him? Said Usopp. Ace is a total mother hen, and Luffy is practically his baby, said Finn, snickering. Knowing some of his old crew was keeping an eye out for Luffy, while letting him grow as a captain eased a lot of his paranoia. Besides, have you met Luffy? He gets into trouble just by breathing. You'll need all the help you can get to keep him from giving you all gray hairs before you're 30, said Coral. Luffy pouted when none of his new crew bothered to deny that assessment. Nami had a headache, but at least these two weren't part of her childhood trauma regarding fishmen. Far from it. They hadn't hesitated to abandon Arlong to protect Luffy and help break him out of the concrete. All while cussing him out about being so damn reckless and how someone named Ace would give him an earful if he died so quickly to a low-ranked idiot on the East Blue. Ace was about to head to the kitchens when he smelled blood. Without thinking twice, he raced to the source and found a barely alive Thatch on the ground with injuries that could prove fatal if they weren't treated immediately. "Jack!" he shouted, and his familiar appeared in seconds. The Phoenix immediately started crying on the worst of the wounds, stabilizing Thatch enough for Ace to switch into his Dr. Pyrite persona. Some might worry about multiple personality disorder, but that was the least of Ace's problems considering the amount of baggage he brought with him from his past life. Besides, it helped him to hide the fact he had an alter ego that wasn't wanted by the Marines. It took Ace 5 hours to properly stabilize Thatch, and it would take a while before the older man was able to function normally again. But his biggest concern was finding out what the hell happened to his friend. Did a Marine sneak on the ship and find a window of opportunity to strike against Oyaji? If so, then why did they target Thatch instead of someone like Marco? While everyone waited with bated breath for Thatch to wake up and tell them what happened, Ace started snooping. Perhaps it was a leftover from his life as Harry Potter, but he couldn't let a mystery like this go, especially when it involved one of his claimed people being seriously hurt from unknown causes. It took him 4 hours to find out there was someone who was missing, along with one of the smaller ships. Ace narrowed his eyes and quietly asked the Moby Dick what time Teach left the ship with one of the scouting vessels, and quietly cursed, because the time frame was well within the window of margin for the one who attacked Thatch to leave without anyone the wiser. Considering the possibility of a traitor, the other division commanders had jumped on the idea of a roll call to find out who was missing. Marco took over for Thatch since the other man was still out cold under a medicated coma. Ace was pissed. "Does anyone know where Teach is?" he demanded, his ire clear. Whitebeard was pissed. It was quickly becoming apparent that Teach was almost certainly the one behind Thatch's near-death condition and was a traitor. For one of his sons, who had been with the crew even during the days of Jewel D. Roger, to betray him like this was unthinkable. Thatch only woke up long enough to confirm Ace's suspicions about Teach. Apparently he had been attacked for the devil fruit he had recently found. Ironically, the joke was on Teach. Ace had been curious to see if he could find out more about Logia-type devil fruits, and had asked to borrow it from Thatch. So long as even a part of it was eaten, the fruit's powers would still be transferred to its new host. However, since Thatch wanted to prank anyone who wanted to try the fruit's power out, they had made a perfect copy using some rotten fruit that was transfigured to look like the devil fruit. Since the common theme to eating them was that they tasted awful, and no one could adequately describe the taste itself with any degree of accuracy, it was questionable if anyone would know the fruit was a fake. Which meant Blackbeard had stolen the fake fruit and nearly killed Thatch. For nothing. And now that his true nature had been exposed, there was no way for him to get the real one. Ace was still going to make an example out of the bastard though, when he caught up to him. He had a personal hatred of traitors, and Blackbeard had ended up as number 1 on his personal shit list. Chapter 11. If Ace were his alternate counterpart, he would have gone after Blackbeard alone to put the traitor down. Ace was not like most pirates. Within 2 weeks of Blackbeard's betrayal, a special wanted poster was distributed among the Grand Line, both in Paradise and the New World. The Marines' bounty system was regarded as more of a list of the who's who on the seas among pirates. The higher the bounty, the more likely the person on the poster was a major player. It was rare for the big names to ever be turned in to the Marines. It was one thing to have the Marines after you. That was par for the course if you were a real pirate. It was an entirely different matter if everyone and their grandmother knew that you had royally pissed off someone like Whitebeard, who was well known and respected or feared, enough that they would make their ire towards you public. Whitebeard didn't have an issue with his sons or daughters leaving the crew or trying to make a name for themselves, like Luffy had. Regardless of what happened, they were still his children. However, the fact that Teach almost killed Thatch over a devil fruit and abandoned them like that pissed him off. And as the commander of the 2nd Division, it was mostly Ace's responsibility to hunt the bastard down and make an example of him. It was up to Ace whether he could horrifically maim Teach to make an example of him, not likely, or straight up kill him. Hence the special bounty posted by Ace with Whitebeard's approval. It contained a certain amount of gold, enough to tempt most of the weaker pirates into acting as informants. and the promise that the Whitebeards would owe whoever helped Ace track Blackbeard down to kill him. It wouldn't be on par with a major favor, but it could lead to a weaker crew being allowed to join a bigger player like the Whitebeards. And that was enough to get more than a few pirates all too happy to start sharing information on where to find Marshal D. Teach. Just to be on the safe side, Ace called Sabo and Luffy to warn them about what Teach had done. Luffy, who had some of the best instincts Ace had seen in a while, had never trusted Teach. In fact, he had gone out of his way to avoid the man if he could. Just as an added precaution, Ace also let people know that Teach had done something to piss off Dr. Pyrite. Since that was his cover as a legitimate doctor, that meant he could listen in to the Marines and not get busted. What he found out only raised his ire towards Teach. That bastard was openly working for the Marines. Ace had the sneaking suspicion that if he hadn't cast the Fidelius on the fact he was Gold Roger's only remaining heir, Teach would have used that as a bartering tool with the Marines. It wouldn't be that hard for the traitor to know Ace would track him down, and the capture of the son of Gold Roger would give Teach a major bartering tool. Enough to even catapult him to warlord if he were inclined. And Sabo said that his paranoia over people out to get him was ridiculous. With Luffy, what the heck is that thing? Asked Nami incredulous. Luffy was dragging some strange doll out from his quarters. Oh, are you going to start them on the special lessons? Said Coral when she saw what he brought out. Yup, we have a bit of time before we hit the Grand Line, so we might as well get started just in case, said Luffy. Special lessons? Said Sanji, already having a bad feeling about this. Ace and II said it's important for everyone on the crew to know certain life-saving procedures by heart. Especially when you have devil fruit users on board, explained Luffy. He made sure everyone at least had the basics down just in case. Nami was looking at him with interest now. What sort of procedures? How to save someone who is choking or recently spent a bit too much time in the water and isn't breathing. It also works for those who get electrocuted or had a massive shock that stops the heart, said Coral, going back to her book. It's mostly basic first aid with a few tricks Ace knew thrown in. I'll be supervising, said Finn. While he did have medical knowledge, they really needed a proper doctor on the crew. Finn specialized in opening people up, but a proper doctor could prescribe medications that could avoid such a scenario. Prevention was the best medicine, after all. Seeing he had the attention of the crew, Luffy fell into a familiar lecturing stance. He had seen Ace teach other members of the crew so often he knew the procedure by heart and could at least teach his own crew the basics. Especially since Finn was supervising to make sure they understood the lesson. It said a lot that Ace could teach Luffy how to perform CPR and show him how to teach others without completely botching it. Nami, unsurprisingly, was the first to master the rather simple lesson plan Luffy had laid out. Then again, she already knew the bare minimum and just needed a bit of fine-tuning. Zoro kept putting too much pressure on the special doll Ace had given Luffy, which he used for demonstrations. If someone was able to perform CPR correctly, the area under the hands would turn green, indicating the required amount of pressure was used. Too much and it turned from red, meaning a cracked rib, to black, indicating that they had broken something and causing a potential fatal injury. The doll was specially designed to light up depending on the amount of pressure required for an average human adult. Luffy had two others, one for the average fishman and another for children under 12. Usopp was the second to get it right, though his success rate was 7 times out of 10. Sanji was enthusiastic, mostly at the thought of mouth-to-mouth with a pretty girl, but could only get it 6 times out of 10. Nami looked at Luffy oddly. Your brother insisted you learn this? She asked. Luffy, Coral, and Finn snickered. Sabo tricked Ace into taking the exams to get an official license as a doctor, and he walked out with 3 of them in the same week. All of them in vastly different fields, said Coral. Ace is a big believer in sharing life-saving knowledge, since it means less risk for the crew once they reach an island. A bit of knowledge now could mean the difference between life and death, said Finn. Even the Whitebeard pirates and the red-haired pirates took the lessons Ace held on how to perform CPR, as well as basic field medic knowledge. More than one pirate has been grounded because they didn't care for a wound properly and stuck suffering from an infection. Ace and II made these special dolls to make it easier for people to learn. You 3 certainly seem to love this Ace guy, said Zoro. Again, Luffy was practically raised by Ace growing up and he gave us a chance to experience real freedom. Never mind what he did for Finn. Do you have any idea how hard it would have been for a fishman to become certified as a full surgeon, considering the way the world government treats us? Said Coral. So where are we going next? Asked Usopp. Logetown, where Gold Roger was born and executed, said Nami. We need to pick up supplies before we hit the Grand Line. Coral and Finn shared a look. Considering Nami had been sticking around the East Blue for so long, odds are she wouldn't know what to get for the Grand Line. Like a log pose, for instance. You get everything for the navigation side of things, Nami. We'll get the essentials for the Grand Line. There are a few tricks that will make our lives easier that only someone who spent time there would know, said Coral. Oh yeah, I forgot that the special log poses were stashed in the other ship, said Luffy. Special log poses? Repeated Nami. Other ship? Said Usopp. Ace gave me his old ship from before he joined the Whitebeard Pirates as a birthday present, mostly to annoy Shanks and Oyaji since they would have to one-up him. It's been specially treated to handle life in the Grand Line, particularly life in Paradise, which is where most pirates enter when they go over Reverse Mountain. Nami twitched. You already had a ship? Then why didn't you use that instead of the Mary? Demanded Nami. Because it's impossible to sail that thing with only 1 or 2 people, said Finn. I've done it with Ace before. Mostly because he knows how to cheat and make it easier, but Luffy has never been on it without Ace and Sabo. Besides, after we helped Usopp, we got the Mary and it's just the right size for our crew since the Romance Dawn is at least half a size bigger. Once we get more members, it'll be easier to maintain, explained Luffy. Not to mention the Romance Dawn was personally retrofitted by Ace to survive the Grand Line until we reached the shipwrights at the end of Paradise. It would be something of a waste to bring it out on one of the blues, said Coral. Exactly how big is this ship? Asked Usopp. Luffy went to his room. Ace had given him the blueprints just in case he needed to do some repairs. Sanji's usual cigarette fell out of his mouth. How big is this kitchen? He said in shock. It's big enough to feed 3 black holes. And I know for a fact Ace personally ensured all the equipment was brand new and the surfaces sterilized to ensure no one would get sick, said Coral. And that's not getting into the infirmary, which is equipped to handle at least a major operation on top of having 3 beds for others, and an isolation area, added Finn happily. Don't forget the special training room, said Luffy. I know Ace added a few weights and other equipment in there, and the navigator's area has a ton of chart paper and special tools needed to write new maps. Nami, Usopp, Sanji and Zoro stared at them. This Ace certainly went over the top for this ship he gave you, said Nami. Again, he was trying to one-up 2 Yonko, one of which happens to be the strongest man alive. Shanks was so irritable with him, snickered Coral. Knowing him, he also left another surprise, just to piss off Shanks, said Finn with a laugh. Nami was twitching. Are you telling me you have a good relationship with a Yonko? She hissed. Even Arlong would have backed off very quickly if he had seen a Yonko's mark. Only an idiot would dare to wear their mark if they weren't actually associated with a stronger crew, especially if they were going to the Grand Line. As one, Luffy, Coral, and Finn revealed the mark of Whitebeard rather proudly. Suddenly, the bandana Luffy wore on his left shoulder made far too much sense. Oyaji didn't mind the fact that I was leaving to become a captain in my own right, and said that if anything happened I was free to bring my crew to join his family, said Luffy. But I wanted to make a name in my own right, so I decided to hide it. Just a tattoo isn't enough to convince people you're an ally of Whitebeard though, said Zoro. Luffy pulled out the small trunk from his room. Inside it was a neatly folded pirate flag with an unmistakable Jolly Roger. It was the flag of Whitebeard, and underneath it was the flag of the red-haired pirates. Nami's twitching got worse. Then she sighed, because at least now she knew that they had strong allies in case things went completely foobar against a stronger pirate. Their small crew couldn't handle any of the big players in the Marines who would attack if they saw Whitebeard or Shanks' mark alongside their own. So the fact that Luffy kept this hidden made perfect sense, at least until they trained up a lot more. However, in areas where pirates congregated in large numbers, showing this sort of mark was akin to telling people not to mess with them. Who is this Ace guy anyway? Asked Usopp. The 2nd Division leader of the Whitebeard Pirates, said Coral, and the only licensed doctor among the main crew. Whitebeard had a lot of nurses, but most doctors with any skill were reasonably reluctant to leave their cushy life for that of a pirate. So if his brother is a doctor, then how skilled is Luffy? Asked Usopp. Rank 3 battlefield medic, said Finn promptly. Coral is a rank 3 as well. Dead silence. What's a rank 3? Asked Zoro. It means Luffy is trained to handle things like broken limbs, minor poisoning, and most of the common wounds among pirates. It also means he has been certified when it comes to finding basic herbal remedies and plants to deal with injuries in the field, said Coral. Which means if something bad happens and Finn is unavailable, Luffy is able to perform treatment until you reach the ship or to a real doctor. Luffy is a certified medic? Think of him a mid-level nurse with emphasis on herbal remedies rather than prescription drugs. If you smell something weird from the room next to his, then odds are he's brewing some remedies for later use, said Finn. Luffy was actually a natural potions master, to Ace's amusement and delight, which meant Ace had drilled as many recipes as he could into Luffy's head and given him an extra copy of the field guide he had made with Sabo's help with common plants and their uses. After the incident when they were captured, Luffy actually paid attention to Ace's lessons on battlefield medicine and spells. Hence why he was a rank 3, which was as high as one could go without any proper medical training. On the plus side, the rookies of the crew felt reassured that Luffy was a lot more competent as a captain and a pirate than they originally thought. It meant he had an actual brain and knew how to use it, despite his usual behavior. Chapter 12. It had been 4 months since Luffy set off as an official pirate captain, and right now he was seriously considering calling Ace in. Nami's condition was getting much worse and Finn didn't have the resources or training to know how to help her beyond the basics. The potion Luffy had given her was the only thing keeping her alive at the moment, and it had nearly given the crew a heart attack because it made Nami as still as death. Which was kind of the point, considering it was called Draft of the Living Death. But still, at the very least, it put Nami's body into a form of stasis until they could find someone who could identify what was wrong with her long enough to heal her. Luffy had the counter potion already made for when she could be treated. At first he was hopeful seeing the number of doctors on the fake pirate's ship, but it was pretty clear this jerk wouldn't let them treat Nami. Then he saw a sight that made him almost cry in relief. Ace! Hearing Luffy cry out that particular name had the rest of the crew going out to finally see what the guy looked like. It was a young man not even 20, wearing what could only be a doctor's coat and some glasses. He had gray eyes, neat black hair kept back in a simple ponytail, and tan skin. His clothing was of someone well off, but well loved. He turned at the voice and grinned. Luffy! Their captain stretched, uncaring of who saw, and practically rammed into Ace's stomach. He wrapped his arms around his older brother at least twice over. What's the matter, Lou? Said Ace. He could tell his brother was stressed. Nami's sick and we had to give her that special potion to put her in stasis, he explained. This is your brother? Said Vivi. Pyrite D. Ace, at your service, madam, said Ace. I thought it was Portagas, said Zoro. I'll explain later with less witnesses, said Luffy. Pyrite. Not the Dr. Pyrite? Said Vivi, hope sparking in her chest. Come on, Lou. Go get your friend and I'll see what I can do. If nothing else, I'll bribe the crazy old bat on the mountain for some of her medicine. Ace frowned the second he saw Nami's condition. What were her symptoms? Finn listed them without hesitation. It sounds like one of the extinct diseases. I don't have any remedies on hand that can handle that. Maybe old Kureha might have the cure, said Ace. Hope lit in Luffy's heart as he carefully picked Nami up onto his back. Fortunately, thanks to the potion, she was stable. A few hours later, the first thing Nami saw when she woke up was a rather handsome young man wearing a doctor's coat with glasses. Oh good, you're awake, he said calmly. Who are you? My name is Dr. Pyrite, he said calmly. Nami stared. You mean the famous doctor who went in and got 3 licenses to practice different fields of medicine on the same week? She said faintly. She could already see their limited funds dropping like a stone already. Doctors, especially ones as skilled as Dr. Pyrite, were expensive. Ace! Dr. Pyrite brightened. Your navigator is fine, Lou. She's still a bit groggy considering the potion you put her under, but she should make a full recovery. Nami stared. This is your brother? Luffy happily hugged his older brother, who looked more indulgent than anything. Ace and I agreed to take on Dr. Kureha's apprentice for a few months in exchange for saving you, sighed Luffy. Chopper is both adorable and skilled. I have no doubt he would become an excellent doctor for you, Luffy. Never mind that Ace would feel a lot better if he personally trained the doctor on Luffy's crew. He had high standards after all. Ace, why are you on Drum Island anyway? Asked Luffy. He had been so worried about Nami that he forgot to ask. Ace's face darkened. I'm tracking that bastard Blackbeard. The only reason I'm still here is because I got slightly sidetracked when I met Kureha's apprentice Chopper. Then I saw your sail and headed down the mountain to meet you, said Ace. Is Thatch? Thatch is both alive and is already back in the kitchen, said Ace. Thatch was beyond pissed at what Teach did, but took solace in the fact that the minor prank Ace played on the crew resulted in the bastard losing far more than he gained. Not only was his true nature known to the crew and their allies now, but he had failed to acquire the Logia power he so coveted. Ace didn't know if it was possible to destroy a devil fruit power, but he was going to make damn sure someone else got it before Teach ever did if he couldn't destroy it. An hour later. Explain how exactly you managed to convince the Dr. Pyrite to be a temporary part of our crew, said Vivi, twitching. Fire Fist Ace is too noticeable, and he's already driven Blackbeard into a corner because he set that bounty on him. Teach is now persona non grata on Whitebeard and Shanks territory, since I made it known that we would pay big for information that leads to his death or capture. Pirates might not sell each other out to Marines because it runs the risk of being captured themselves, but a favor from Whitebeard on top of a monetary reward is more than enough incentive to pick up a snail and call a number. I've basically unleashed an untold number of informants that Blackbeard can't track against him, explained Ace. However, if words reaches him that the 2nd Division commander of the Whitebeards is in the area, he might try to run or set up an ambush. I see, said Vivi. However, it's well known Dr. Pyrite has no issue buying passage with respectable pirate crews, since it's cheaper than actually buying a ship or paying a crew. It's gotten to the point that the Marines gave Dr. Pyrite an official flag in exchange for him treating their men for free. In exchange, they'll look the other way to any ships flying it. Within reason, said Ace. Luffy looked at his brother. They gave you a flag? It was Shitty Gramps' idea, apparently, said Ace dryly. So long as Dr. Pyrite agrees to heal their men for a massive discount, they agree to look the other way. And since the Straw Hats are still considered a low-level threat, despite the bounties they have on them, odds are most Marine ships will ignore it if it's flying my flag. Luffy shuddered at the idea of Garp. He did care about his grandpa, but the man was a complete nutcase who went about showing his concern for his grandsons in a way that left them traumatized for life. Well, Chopper, I have good news. You're a relatively healthy example of the native reindeer species, though a tad underweight. A few good meals should add a bit more muscle definition to you, said Ace. Are you sure your brother will be okay out there? Asked Chopper. I doubt that pathetic fake king would be able to defeat someone who survived in the New World for over 5 years. And Luffy hasn't even begun to use hockey just yet, said Ace dismissively. Wapol was a complete joke compared to some of the people on the Grand Line. The only reason he hadn't been offed yet was because he was a royal like Vivi. Sure enough, Wapol and his more annoying minions went flying. So are you going to join Luffy's crew or what? I can tell you right now, he won't think any less of you for being a reindeer. After all, I trained Finn up to be a licensed surgeon despite the prejudice the world government has against fishmen. Chopper looked positively adorable with how shy he was. You really think I could be the ship's doctor? So long as you're competent, Luffy will gladly take you on. Besides, Finn would rather be the ship's surgeon anyway. Mixing remedies makes him sneeze something awful, said Ace cheerfully. That wasn't getting into the fact that Ace would be joining them for a bit. Traveling on his own was fine, but it would be pretty hard to track down Blackbeard if people started talking about Fire Fist Ace being in the area. Teach was one of those who hadn't been told that Dr. Pyrite and Fire Fist Ace were actually the same person, and with the Fidelius up and running, Ace would have had to tell him personally. So he wouldn't know to run if he heard that Dr. Pyrite was traveling with a rookie crew and just happened to be in the area. From what he could figure out, Teach was traveling roughly on the same path as Luffy's crew was, which means he'd have a better chance of running into the bastard if he stuck with his little brother. So long as their log pose didn't deviate from the one Nami was using, he had a good feeling about finding the prick. When he did find Teach, he wasn't going to give the traitor a chance to pull out some underhanded tactic like calling on the Marines to capture him. He was going to outright kill the bastard, even if it meant using the same spell that killed his parents and so many others in his last life as Harry Potter. Whether he put the traitor through the Cruciatus first was up for debate at the moment. Look on the bright side. If you do travel with Luffy, then it means I can test your medical knowledge and improve your skill as a doctor, said Ace. Really? Said Chopper excitedly. Ace chuckled. The little guy was just like a kid. He knew Chopper would get along great with Luffy, and much to his amusement, Chopper agreed to act as the official doctor on the crew, while leaving all surgery-related details to Finn. To be fair, Chopper's hooves didn't really make it easy to handle a knife, and he usually stayed in his smaller form. Not to mention he had spent years learning how to be a doctor. Ace found it amusing that Chopper ended up taking lessons from Luffy regarding potions and herbal remedies. The little guy was going to fit in perfectly with this crew. A few days later, "Yo, Lu, want to try out the Path to Dawn?" Ace called out. "Path to Dawn?" repeated Nami. Luffy was at Ace's side in seconds, as was an amused Coral. "Where did you put the Romance Dawn anyway?" asked Coral. It's in my room on a special stand, said Luffy, grinning. Besides, Mary is cool having a sibling travel with us. You talk as if the ship has a mind of its own, said Vivi. It does. It's really hard to find a ship that has a soul, but the Mary definitely has one. Whoever had it before must have really loved this ship. I know for a fact the ship's spirit thinks of the crew as family, said Ace absently. It's the same reason I picked the Romance Dawn, despite needing to remodel it instead of having one built. The Romance Dawn had been in need of some major repairs when they first got it. While the price of the ship was relatively low, the cost of repairing it would have meant they could have bought a brand new one for the same price. Sabo didn't like the cost, but he put his misgivings aside and let Ace buy the ship. His faith had been rewarded, because the Romance Dawn had let them survive the New World, when other ships the same make would have been totaled in the first year. There were a few times Sabo would even swear that the tiller had moved under his hand and guided them on a safer path, without any input from him. Luffy had noticed it immediately the first time he meditated on the Mary, which was one of the reasons why he had opted to use the slightly smaller ship instead of the one his brother gave him. What kind of ship is that? Asked Usopp, baffled. He wasn't the only one. A special ship, said Luffy, sniggering. He expertly helped Ace set it up with the ease of long practice. It was a lot more stable on the water compared to the Dusk to Dawn, and a bit bigger too. Then again, the other ship was originally a prototype to see if he could make a hot air balloon and to help his brothers practice with their rune work. Seeing the curious expressions of the Straw Hat crew, Ace grinned. Yo Finn, you good to man the ship while I blow their minds? I'm good, said Finn. He was used to traveling via air, so the novelty of flight had lost enough of its appeal that he could stay on the ship. Needless to say, Nami was in love with the balloon ride. Being able to observe clouds up close and actually touch them was amazing for her. The next morning, Usopp was with Ace, doing a basic checkup of the Mary. Marco had once joked that Ace took his job as a doctor too seriously, because he tended to include the actual ship to the list of patients. He might skip it for the most part on the Moby Dick because they had a dedicated team of shipwrights to deal with that sort of thing who were all too happy to give Ace tips on how to fix the Dawn and sometimes help out on slow days. But he had become an unofficial expert when it came to the smaller vessels like the Mary. And from what he saw, the Caravel had taken a bit of a beating from the Grand Line. Well, the patient is beaten up, but not in critical condition so far. Then again, a Caravel this size was never meant for the sort of weather and trials you'd get on the Grand Line, said Ace, marking off another box on his checkboard. Our last stop should be the keel. If anything happens to that, then you're going to need another ship. The keel? Said Usopp. Ace flipped to another page which had a human skeleton on it. Think of the keel like a spine. If it's intact, then the nerves can travel up and down the body no problem. However, if it's badly damaged, then the body becomes paralyzed or worse. It's the biggest beam that runs along the middle of the ship, explained Ace. Ace closely examined the beam. There was a lot of wear and tear, but so far no cracks had shown up. Just to be safe, he started making a note of which runes to use to strengthen it. After all, he considered the Mary as part of the Straw Hat crew, and he knew they would be utterly devastated if anything happened to it. Overall, it was in decent condition considering it was never designed to handle Paradise, much less the New World. But it could use a few repairs. The problem was that this crew didn't have any of the needed supplies or materials to do that, much less the capital to buy them. Chapter 13. The second Ace heard about rain dinners, he had to grin. I think we can solve a few problems at once, he said. What do you mean? Asked Nami. Your ship needs some repairs done, and your funds are too low to buy most of the needed supplies. And going with you directly to deal with Crocodile would be overkill. Never mind that it implies I don't trust Luffy to handle himself in a serious fight. Which is why we should split up, at least partially. Luffy grinned at that. You're going to hit that casino and rob them for everything they have in a way they can't come after you for, he guessed. Yup, said Ace, smirking. Naturally, any winnings I get I'll use to buy the supplies to fix the ship, and this way you can go on your adventure without having to worry about someone stealing the Mary. Like the Marines. And if you actually beat Crocodile, I may split my winnings with your crew. Nami perked up at that. She looked at Luffy. How good is his luck? He was banned from any gambling establishments in Oyaji's territory as well as Shanks. Never mind the unofficial poker night the crew held, said Luffy immediately. Our luck tends to go from chaotic during adventures and almost godly when it comes to gambling. I call it the Midas touch, said Ace helpfully. Midas? Repeated Chopper. It's an old myth about a king who loved treasure so much that the gods granted him a blessing. Anything he touched would turn to gold. And I do mean anything. One day he accidentally touched his daughter with the hand that had been blessed and she became a gold statue. The only way to reverse the transformation was to put her under running water, explained Ace. Luffy grimaced. Wasn't that one of the Greek myths you told us? Yup, said Ace. Those guys were messed up, said Luffy. What do you mean messed up? Asked Nami. There was this one story about a hero who married a princess, only to drop her for a younger woman. The princess was so distraught over what happened she killed her own kids, said Luffy grimacing. Vivi was understandably horrified by that. You're forgetting the guy essentially raped her. The princess in question was forced to fall in love with him due to the influence of the goddess of love because he was on a quest. As a result, she murdered her own father and brother to help him, and when he found a younger woman more to his liking, he essentially dumped her, despite having 2 children with her. Naturally, the spell she was under broke at that point, and when she realized what she had done, she snapped and killed her children, said Ace. And don't get me started on the tale about the guy who fell into the ocean with wax wings. I don't think I want to hear any more, said Nami Green. Vivi nodded emphatically at that. You sure? I have a ton of Greek mythology and Luffy knows most of them, said Ace grinning. Why wax wings? And how did that even work? Asked Usopp. A father and son were trapped in a tower by a king. To escape, he took the feathers left behind by the birds and some wax to create a pair of fake wings to fly away. Somehow they managed to make it work, but the son wanted to see how high he could fly and got too close to the sun. The wax melted and he fell to his death in the ocean, to his father's despair, said Ace. I bet your favorite story is about the immortal who brought fire to humans, said Luffy. Prometheus was a good story, but I always liked the cautionary tales more. Can you just stop? Please. You sure? Said Luffy. And to think I haven't even gotten into the exploits of the god that ruled that particular pantheon, or his family, said Ace far too cheerfully. Don't forget the musicals. Has the crew forgiven you for introducing them to that one musical about meat pies? Asked Luffy wickedly. Ace cackled wickedly. The Whitebeard crew still refused to eat meat pies unless everyone was accounted for, to the amusement of Pops. Sometimes Thatch sent a few of them out on errands without telling anyone to freak them out. What musical? On second thought, never mind, said Nami after thinking about it. She was going to have nightmares. She just knew it. What's a musical? Asked Chopper. Ace patted his hat. A musical is a story told with a lot of singing involved, said Ace helpfully. I'm almost afraid to ask what musical you introduced them to that had them terrified of meat pies, said Nami. It wasn't the plot that disturbed them, but the way they disposed of the large number of corpses they created, said Ace. Sanji was the first to get it. How would that even work? I mean, how did the customers not know what they were eating? The time period they were in wasn't the cleanest, and you would be lucky to find a restaurant that didn't have massive health code violations. Never mind the fact that there's a very good reason pigs have been used as human analogs for years, outside of the fact burnt flesh can smell like pork, said Ace. Nami looked like she was highly contemplating swearing off pork forever, as did Vivi. What was the story about? Asked Zoro. The girls shot him a glare. A barber was thrown into prison on false charges because the judge wanted to sleep with the man's wife. As such, he went away for 15 years before escaping, only to find out that his wife was dead, and his daughter had been taken in by the man who threw him into prison and raped his wife. His only thought was to get revenge and get his daughter back. And what better way to do that than to slit the man's throat while he was in for a shave? The problem was that the young man who saved him at sea basically tipped the judge off his ward was planning to run away, and the judge became furious. So how do meat pies come into the equation? Asked Sanji. The woman who owned the shop just below where he worked as a barber recognized him, and suggested the best way to deal with the bodies they created was to cook them up in her food and serve them to people, since apparently her cooking wasn't good enough and meat was hard to come by at the time. So how did it end? He kills the judge. The old beggar woman who hovered around certain areas turned out to be his wife who had lost her mind from the poison she had consumed to kill herself only to fail, and the woman who cooked people was thrown into the oven herself, said Ace. The daughter ran away with the sailor who saved her father's life, and it's debatable if she even knew the barber was her father. Ugh. Don't you know any other stories? Complained Nami. I have an entire library of romantic comedies and murder mysteries with a romantic subplot. It's just guys tend to enjoy a good horror novel every once in a while, said Ace grinning. You will be sharing those, said Nami ominously. Luffy wondered if he should warn Nami of Ace's habit to play pranks. like switching the covers of his books so that the contents didn't match. The guys, save for Chopper and Usopp who didn't like scary things, all asked for horror stories. Or, in the case of Luffy, more mythology. Ace felt strong vindictive amusement as he was swiftly bleeding Crocodile's precious casino dry, without having to cheat once. It wasn't to say he didn't know how. It was just that with his luck it wasn't truly necessary. That, and he might have been a little overboard ensuring that the other poker players remained honest by basically ensuring their ability to cheat was heavily compromised. It had taken 3 different major players being escorted out by less than amused guards before the others caught the unspoken message he was sending. Play honest or else. By the end of the day, once Luffy had drawn out the big fish, how he had gotten caught in a sea stone cage Ace didn't want to know, but at least his baby brother had the sense to hide his magic from Smoker. The Marines didn't need to know Luffy was now partially immune to it. But it ended well thanks to the fact that Luffy's crew was competent. Ace's next move was to go get the supplies needed to repair the ship. "You sure you'll be okay?" asked Ace. "I'll be fine, Ace and I. Just remember, once you guys get back I'll start teaching your crew about hockey," said Ace. Luffy perked up at that. Teaching CPR was one thing, since he had seen Ace do it so many times and had the special dolls to help. But hockey required someone who knew what they were doing. And Ace, to the amusement of everyone else, was a natural teacher. "By the way, would you mind taking Jack with you?" "Who's Jack?" asked Vivi. "Oi, Jack, go with Luffy for a bit, will ya?" Ace called out. A magnificent red and gold bird flew out of a ball of fire and onto Luffy's shoulder, where it started preening his hair. "What is that?" said Nami, fascinated. "Jack is Ace's familiar." "He's a phoenix," said Luffy, stroking Jack's feathers with the ease of long practice. Jack trilled happily. "Oh, and before I forget, Chopper, come here a moment," said Ace. "What is it?" asked Chopper. The weather here was murder for his poor body. Ace handed him a vest. "Put this on." Chopper swapped out his vest and put on the one Ace gave him. And his eyes went wide. It's cold," he said happily. He felt so much better. "I put a special permanent charm on that vest so that it can regulate the temperature for you. As a cold weather creature, desert islands are going to be really dangerous. The threat of heat stroke goes up exponentially, especially with that fur of yours. After all, it wouldn't do for the cruise doctor to become sick because of the heat, right?" "Ace and I is so awesome," said Chopper enthusiastically. "Wait, how did you make that?" asked Nami. "I got pendants for the rest of you that does the same thing, and I have special canteens that hold a lot of fresh water since dehydration is one of the leading causes of death in a desert island for outsiders. I actually sold a vest like this to another crew who had a mink that came from a cold weather island." Beepo was amusing, and he had made quick friends with Law once. He realized Ace had a solution to the issue that kept making his crew members sick. Being able to talk shop with a pirate doctor put Law in a good mood for days. And Ace may or may not have given Law the snail number to Sabo, who was in the Revolutionaries, so that he could track Don Flamingo's whereabouts. People really underestimated the value of reliable communication. "You seriously have an awesome older brother, Luffy," said Usopp, feeling the blessed relief of cold air instead of the oppressive heat. "I am a doctor, after all. It wouldn't do for my little brother's crew to get killed because they were overheated or dehydrated. Oh, and before I forget Luffy, Crocodile is a Logia user like me," said Ace. "And considering you're challenging him as a full pirate captain, don't hold back. If necessary, feel free to use that." "Got it, big brother," said Luffy, his expression determined. Unlike the goofy, lovable idiot, there was a true pirate. He hadn't spent several years with the Whitebeards learning the ins and outs of the Grand Line to die here and now. Ace went to work on the ship, adding a few fun surprises for his baby brother to find when he got back. With Luffy. "So Luffy, how long have you known Ace?" asked Vivi. "Ace and I practically raised me," said Luffy. "Gramps brought me to Dawn Island when I was a baby, and Ace got really mad when he found out that I was left with the bandit gang. Mostly because they didn't know how to handle kids at all. He taught me how to fight and healed me up every time Gramps showed up." "Sounds like you really love your brother," said Vivi, smiling. And it was pretty clear from the way Ace acted around Luffy that he really cared about his little brother. "You kidding? If you got Luffy started on his brother, he'd never shut up for hours. Though now that I've met him, I can see why," said Nami. "Yeah, that Ace guy certainly lives up to the hype Luffy's made of him," said Zoro, impressed in spite of himself. Normally he'd take the sort of things Luffy said about his brother with a grain of salt, but apparently his captain hadn't been exaggerating. "Why were you clutching your left arm, Luffy?" asked Vivi. "This is my weapon against Bon Clay. When he turned into me earlier, he didn't have anything on his left arm, right?" said Luffy. Nami's eyes widened. "Wait. You were wearing a longer sleeved shirt than normal when he turned into you," she said in realization. "Everything else was in the wash," said Luffy in annoyance. "That's right. Bon Clay's version of you didn't have anything on the left shoulder," said Zoro in realization. "But when he turned into me, he had the same tattoo." "Because he knew it was there," said Luffy grinning. He carefully slipped the bandana on his shoulder down, to expose the mark of another pirate captain. Vivi's eyes went wide, because she had seen that exact same mark enlarged on Ace's back once they left Drum Island. "Is that? I took Oyaji's mark before I was 15. He was fully supportive of me being a pirate captain in my own right and said that if anything ever happened I was welcome to come back to his crew. No matter what, I'm still considered one of Whitebeard's sons," said Luffy proudly. "I just hide it because I want to make a name in my own right without having to rely on Oyaji, and because if the Marines knew I was one of his they'd send people that the others aren't quite ready to deal with just to spite him." Nami was grinning. "So if we run into Bon Clay and he tries to pretend he's you, we can bust him by checking his arm." "So what's the deal with the bird?" asked Zoro. "Jack is probably bored, and this way Ace knows I have a special trick up my sleeves in case we need to stabilize someone in a hurry," said Luffy. "Phoenix tears have healing powers, and if you drink them they can cure any poison, toxin, or venom." "What about that hockey stuff Ace mentioned?" asked Zoro. "It's a pretty standard ability in the other half of the Grand Line," said Luffy. "There's 3 types, but only a select few can use the 3rd type. The other 2 are known as Armament Hockey and Observation Hockey." Unknown to Luffy, he had fallen into Ace's usual lecturing stance. Observation Hockey allows you to see and hear a lot of things that you would otherwise miss, like Nami's ability to pick up on weather patterns before they happen in a split second. Armament Hockey is something I know Zoro is going to be rather interested in. It's an ability that allows even ordinary people to be able to hit a Devil Fruit user, regardless of what ability they have. Seeing he had their full attention, Luffy grinned. "I'm so used to fighting Ace and II that I've learned to use Armament Hockey like it's second nature in order to actually hit him." For the first time in a long time, Vivi felt the spark of hope become a conflagration. Chapter 14. Vivi was never more relieved that Luffy's brother was such a versatile doctor than after the battle. While the Straw Hats were all recovering from the fight against Crocodile, to the shock of many, it was a one-sided slaughter thanks to Luffy, the famous Pyrite D. Ace was busy working his tail off ensuring that as many people survived the aftermath as possible. Between him, Chopper, Finn and Coral, the injuries of the people caught up in the fake rebellion caused by Crocodile were treated in an efficient manner. There were a number of lives saved because Ace had opted to come in after the fight was over to heal people rather than join in. Considering how drained the Straw Hats were, odds were that Ace would have been almost as tired as his brother if he had gotten involved. In his words, sending both brothers against Crocodile would have been overkill and a sign that Ace didn't think his little brother could win. Luffy's smile when he realized Ace honestly believed he could kill Crocodile on his own was practically blinding. Vivi would openly swear to anyone who asked that the fact Ace trusted Luffy to kill a warlord solo was the entire reason it had been a one-sided slaughter. Luffy was too busy riding on the high that his brother, who he idolized, trusted him to beat a major player to notice the poison and the injuries inflicted. Still, by the time Luffy finally woke up and the Marines headed their way, she was unsurprised by the fact that Ace gave her Luffy's snail number, along with the number to their other brother Sabo. Considering all Luffy and Ace had done for them, Vivi had no problem acting as a secret informant for the revolutionaries, especially after hearing what the world government had been doing behind people's backs. There was no way to justify the deaths of countless children because they wanted to wipe out the line of Gold Roger. Considering the atrocities committed by Crocodile with the blessing of the world government who did nothing because he was a warlord, Vivi refused to ignore it any longer. Hence why Ace gave her Sabo's contact number. A royal on the side of the revolutionaries gave them access to information that would be impossible to get otherwise. "If you want to continue with the crew, just call the snail. I'll come to pick you up or send Jack to find you and bring you straight to them," said Ace. With Ace around, Luffy didn't have to stay within sight of Alabasta and run the risk of the Marines coming after them. He was fast enough to snatch Vivi up in his dragon form or have Jack pick her up and deposit her on the Mary. However, Ace didn't think Vivi would stay with the crew. Right now her people needed a leader, and she would be casting everything aside if she chose to become a real pirate. After everything she went through, Vivi would likely stay in Alabasta to help the island to heal from the damage done by Crocodile. However, the fact that Luffy understood what Ace meant when he explained that and still gave her the open offer to join his crew at a later date if she were ever inclined meant the world to Vivi, as it was his way of saying no matter what she would forever be one of his crew regardless of whether she was on the ship or not. Ace made a note to deliver one of the special mirrors he was developing to Vivi once he figured out the right rune combination. Hearing someone was one thing, but being able to put a face to the voice was even better, especially since one needed a visual to teleport somewhere. The three brothers had long since mastered silent teleportation, but they still needed a visual in order to use it. It was a lot less risky compared to apparition, which Ace had never liked and had gone out of his way to find an alternative method. As Ace suspected, Vivi opted to remain with her kingdom, though about 2 weeks later she made a tentative call to the Mary via the snail Luffy had, and was greeted with enthusiasm as if she had never properly left. The relief in her voice realizing Luffy hadn't been joking when he said she was free to return to them anytime was enormous. The reaction to the fact Nico Robin was on their ship was met with mixed results. Luffy didn't care about her past. Back in the temple she had given Cobra the antidote once Luffy had killed Crocodile, and despite the trouble she gave them she had never actually killed anyone, though she had plenty of opportunity. "I don't trust her," said Nami flatly. "Considering the world government has been after her since she was 7, I would think you'd give her a break." "What?" said Zoro. Robin stiffened. Nico Robin was given a massive bounty at the tender age of 7, and is one of the rare people who can claim to have survived a Buster Call. She is also the last known survivor of O'Hara, an island that was once filled with scholars who were attempting to decrypt an ancient language that the world government is dead set on remaining dead. Considering what happened, I can only assume they succeeded and that Robin learned how to read the ancient writing as well, said Ace flatly. Luffy stiffened, for a different reason than Robin assumed when she saw his reaction. If Luffy wanted to cut her loose, she would be in a lot of trouble since they were on open sea and she was surrounded. The Straw Hats might be stronger than they looked, but she knew there was little chance she could defeat Ace. So basically the world government forced her to remain on the run for years, unable to trust anyone because they're scared of a language? That's as stupid as the reason they've been targeting you since before you were born, Ace and I, said Luffy, openly affronted. Nami looked at Robin with considerably more sympathy now. After what Arlong put her through and the way she had to work with the very people who destroyed her home and got her mother killed, it was no wonder Robin had trust issues. Why would the world government be after you before you were even born? Asked Robin. The way Luffy phrased that said that the Marines had been trying to kill Ace before he ever became a pirate. Because they're super paranoid about the fact that the former pirate king left a living legacy, to the point they murdered countless infants and small toddlers in an attempt to ensure that his bloodline stayed dead, said Ace pissed. If not for shitty Gramps, odds were they would have succeeded. Of course, if they knew what Luffy's bloodline was, they wouldn't hesitate to send even bigger players against the crew to kill him. Luffy? Repeated Nami. Why would they want to kill Luffy? Luffy rolled his eyes. My dad is Monkey D. Dragon, the leader of the revolutionaries. And Gramps is Monkey D. Garp, the marine hero, said Luffy. It was clear he didn't care about his lineage all that much. Nami stared at him. Your grandfather is the marine hero? He might be a good marine, but he's a shit grandfather. Asshole thought that leaving us with bandits was a bright idea and kept throwing us into hellish training that made no sense and would have killed normal kids. He still hasn't stopped crowing about the fact that I became a real doctor, even though he has to use my alias when he talks about me, said Ace irritably. The jerk honestly believed forcing the bandits to raise us like unwanted extras would toughen us up enough that we could survive once the Marines knew about us. Luffy's snickering was extra evil. Bet he still howls with rage every time he thinks of you coming onto his ship, after all the times you and Sabo and I robbed it when it was in port. Ace's smirk was just as wicked. People underestimate the sticky fingers of children, especially ones that can ferret out all the good shit and know how to hide it until the adults have their backs turned. Nami had a headache. So did Sanji and Usopp. I guess we're lucky that Massive Sea King appeared and drove off the Marines, considering who was on that ship, said Nami. Luffy started cackling. Nami glared at him. Oh, what now? That wasn't a Sea King. That was Ace and I, he said cackling. Dead silence. What? Surprisingly, it was Robin who said that, not Nami. Ace grinned and dove off the side of the ship to the horror of everyone else. Only for the same Sea King that had driven off the Marines to pop its head over the railing. What the hell? Said Nami in shock. Everyone but Luffy stared dumbly at the overgrown lizard. Ace and I can turn into a dragon, said Luffy as if it were obvious. Oddly enough, when he's in that form water doesn't affect him at all. Nami threw up her hands in frustration. Any other surprises you'd like to spring on us at the moment? She demanded. Only to come face to face with another creature where Luffy had been standing. It was a massive bird with at least 3 pairs of wings, a long flowing tail and a sharp-looking beak. Ace snickered. You have no idea how hard I laughed when I realized Luffy's animal form was a thunderbird, he said amused. Though nothing is as hilarious as watching Luffy swim in that form. Shishishi. Please tell me he can't talk in that form, said Nami, pinching her nose. And what in blazes is a thunderbird? A thunderbird is a rare creature that can create storms on demand, said Ace. Which is ironic because rubber is a natural insulator against lightning and electricity. I can talk better than Ace and I can in dragon form. He gave up on it because the words got so mangled and just uses telepathy, said Luffy, his face wide in a wicked grin. I give up. Come get me when the world makes sense again, said Nami irate. Robin, however, focused intently on the two brothers. You said that when you're in that form, water has no effect on you? She asked. Yeah. For some reason, the magic in the transformation shields us from the effects water has on those who have eaten devil fruits, said Ace. I would like to say magic doesn't exist, except I just saw Luffy turn into a giant 6-winged bird, said Zoro. People either lost the ability or lost the knowledge required to train it, said Ace shrugging. Which reminds me, I need to get you all started on basic hockey training soon. This magic, does it have any other applications? Ace's instincts told him something else was up. Let me guess. You think Pluton or the ancient language have something to do with the lost art of magic? Robin nodded. I've never bothered to get close to the poneglyphs, so I have no idea what sort of language is written on them. However, I do know a wide array of runes, though Luffy is still an intermediate at reading them, much less applying them. Can you write any samples of the language on them? Asked Ace. Robin nodded. Do you have paper and something to write with? She asked. Ace produced it at once from out of nowhere. She quickly scribbled a few sentences in the ancient language. Ace took one look at it and frowned. Well, it's not Latin, Sanskrit, Norse, Egyptian, or Arabic. He said, in fact, if I didn't know any better, I'd swear this looks like the Druidic language of the Celts when used by the elders when imparting important messages to only the highest-ranking member of the clan. It fell out of favor when Christianity really took off and the old ways slowly gave way to a more civilized era. Ace examined the runes from different angles. By any chance, did you write "Never tickle a sleeping dragon"? He asked oddly. Robin stiffened. She had thought he would never notice the little joke she had written that she had seen on the O'Hara Poneglyph before the Buster Call. She had always found it amusing. You can read this? Ace sighed. I knew this looked familiar. Why did you pick this particular phrase anyway? It was a little joke that was on the Poneglyph in O'Hara, said Robin. Ace eyed her a moment, as a sneaking suspicion crossed his mind. If he was right, then there was a chance the Poneglyphs were really remnants of something else. He took out a stick, roughly a foot in length and polished. He handed it to Robin. Try flicking that while holding it, he said. Luffy watched with curiosity as Robin humored him. She made a little flicking motion with the stick, only to set a barrel 3 feet away on fire. Luffy was on her in seconds, his grin even bigger than before. Ace, does this mean? Robin stared at the stick in her hand in shock. It looks like Robin might be a witch, and if I'm right, then Pluton might be the remnants of a society that I thought was behind me, said Ace. We better check the rest of your crew to see if they have the same ability. Out of the crew, only Zoro couldn't create any odd reactions with the stick. Though from what Ace could tell when he examined the swordsman, it was most likely because Zoro was a squib. He had magic in his blood, he was just unable to use it normally. Ace sighed. It looked like they were going to have a busy month or two. Having a crew that could use magic would provide a major boon to Luffy down the road, especially Chopper. Having a trained healer on his crew would only benefit them long term. By the way, Ace and I found this weird egg in the desert when I got split up from the others, said Luffy. Luffy knew how valuable familiars were, and something about the egg called to him. Ace took one look at it and laughed. You are truly one of the blessed, little brother, to find an unhatched phoenix egg during an adventure. Looks like Jack is going to have a little brother or sister. Luffy perked up at that. Ace sat his little brother down and coached him in how to hatch the egg, so that the animal within would be bonded to his little brother from birth. What emerged from the egg was a female phoenix, who Luffy immediately named Hedwig, after the owl that Ace had loved so much in his past life. It was small now, but in a few months it would grow just as quickly as Jack did. And since they weren't from the same nest, it meant the brothers now had a mating pair of magical birds. Chapter 15. If someone had told Robin that she might find a living clue to the lost century in her lifetime, she would have laughed at you in the face. However, she couldn't deny the evidence of the mysterious power that the scholars had called Pluton, staring at her in the face. Or the fact that she apparently had it as well. Ace not only had memories of a past life, but from everything suggested he had lived at the tail end of the lost century. Especially the way he openly corrected her use of the ancient language so that it flowed better. Even she couldn't speak the language as fluently as he did. Though according to him, the reason the scholars of O'Hara had such trouble reading the thing was because it required a certain level of magic in the body. Seeing actual books of ancient languages she didn't recognize excited her. Ace didn't mind teaching her how to read and speak the languages, and Luffy was a testament to his skill as a teacher. Robin couldn't keep the excitement off her face at the thought of having someone teach her to read languages she had seen before but had never been able to comprehend. She had a photographic memory, so she had hopes Ace could help her translate some of the ruins she had seen over the years. The day Ace brought out something he called a pensieve, Robin dragged him to one of the unused rooms in the Mary. She had zero complaints about his stamina or creativity. Though the second Nami caught on what happened, she promptly dragged Robin away for some much-needed girl talk. With the guys. "You know, I do believe you're the first guy on the here who's actually slept with a woman on the ship," commented Zoro. It hadn't taken them more than 10 minutes to figure out what happened. Ace pinched his nose. "Please tell me you're exaggerating. The only indication I've seen that Luffy even knows what sexes happens whenever he sees Nami. Damn it. I knew my brother was dense, but this is ridiculous. I didn't try to shelter him that much outside of warning him about communicable diseases," said Ace, exasperated. Yes, he was a mother hen sometimes, but he wouldn't try to keep his little brother from developing a sex life. Outside of giving him the talk and a warning about certain diseases that came from sleeping around too much without precautions, he didn't forbid his brother from getting a girlfriend. From the looks of things, Luffy's tunnel vision about becoming the Pirate King had come to bite Ace in the ass. Ace looked at the other two men. All right, has Luffy shown any sign of being interested in girls? Or guys? On this crew? Outside of a nosebleed when he saw Nami naked. Even if the first time was when Bon Clay turned into her. Not really, said Zoro. Considering what I heard about how Nami became a permanent member of the crew, I have a feeling she wouldn't be against it. And Luffy would know better than to let personal feelings get in the way of running the crew. He's seen how a relationship can work between crewmates without causing internal strife, said Ace tiredly. He was not letting Luffy become a 30-year-old virgin because of tunnel vision. Nami, unsurprisingly, had been fine with the idea of making the first move. Apparently she had picked up the fact Luffy was incredibly dense regarding the subject but hadn't known if anyone had talked to him about it. On the plus side, Luffy's antics seemed to mellow out a bit. They loved their captain, but even the crew could admit he tended to get on their nerves sometimes. A week later, Ace's expression as they drew closer to Jaya could only be described as stormy. He could sense that they were drawing close to that bastard Blackbeard. Seeing a galleon fall from the sky, that expression went from stormy to excited. I completely forgot. Jaya is close to one of the access points to Skypiea. Luffy's expression became like a kid in a candy store with an unlimited credit card. You mean that island where you can get dials? That's Skypiea? What's Skypiea? Asked Nami. There's a series of sky islands that float on super dense clouds in the sky. They're a total pain in the ass to get to if you can't fly, and a lot of the weaker pirates doubt they exist. But there's proof in the presence of special items called dials. They're super hard to get on the Blue Sea, but they're pretty common on the Sky Islands and they tend to trade rather favorably to those who make it up there. How favorably? Asked Nami. Very favorably. Stuff like actual dirt goes like crazy up there. I've traded her enough soil for someone to start a small planted garden and I got a ton of local fruit and things from them, said Ace. Only issue is actually finding an access point or the special cloud they tend to be on. I completely forgot the route you were taking would lead to one of the more easily accessed ones. Wait, you've been up there? Said Nami. Ace smirked. I am a dragon, after all. Flying that high isn't an issue. Not to mention that the hot air balloons I have can go that high with no problem so long as you can handle the fact that the air gets thinner. It's no different than being on the top of a really high mountain, said Ace. We are so going there, said Luffy. Nami looked at her log pose, and her eyes widened. The pose? It's pointing upward. Ace grinned. Seems like your luck is holding out again, little brother. Looks like Skypiea is in the area at the moment. Luffy was already eager to go see it. Luffy was a surprisingly good actor when he wanted to be. He kept his expression neutral, acting as though he hadn't heard what Teach did to Thatch as the odorous man greeted him like an old friend. He didn't change his expression once, even as Ace calmly walked up behind Teach and drew his gun. Did you really think I wouldn't track your sorry ass down after what you did? Said Ace, his voice stone cold. Dead silence. Any pirate within 7 feet of the obviously pissed off Whitebeard pirate backed away. Not even that jackass Bellamy was stupid enough to attract Ace's attention. Teach looked pissed too. You? How did you swap out that devil fruit? Ace's eyes were cold. Tricking you was easy. Thatch wanted to see if anyone was stupid enough to fall for it and let me borrow it for a few weeks to play around with, since it only takes a partial bite out of a devil fruit to impart the powers. Not like anyone would know the difference between a rotten fruit that was altered to look like the real thing and the actual fruit, considering no one would be stupid enough to eat those things twice. Anyone who had eaten a devil fruit would tell you. Those things tasted indescribably bad. So much so that no one sane would eat them twice, even if they had no idea that doing so would kill you. Blackbeard looked murderous. You really think you can take me, brat? Ace chuckled darkly. You really think I was stupid enough to show everything I could do around a man my little brother instinctively knew was trouble? I knew you weren't to be trusted with the way Luffy acted around you without knowing why. Ace cocked his gun back. And I despise traitors who think nothing of murdering a fellow crew member they had been friends with for years, all for power. Of course, the fact you're actively assisting the Marines in trying to bring the Whitebeards down just gave me even more incentive to kill you and annihilate your entire crew. Luffy, by this point, was going to check on his crew to ensure they had restocked any supplies they needed. As a captain of his own crew, he knew that he couldn't interfere directly unless something happened to Ace. Any real captain would know better than to get involved with an internal dispute like this. Teach smirked and Ace knew the bastard had likely activated his armament hockey already, which was why he wasn't going to waste his ammo on this trash. The gun was just a distraction to hide the fact his wand was behind his back. Teach should have paid more attention to the stick and not the gun, because what Ace did next had him in agony. Crucio, a jet of red light slammed into Teach, causing him to scream like the damned. Every nerve ending was on fire, feeling as if Ace was directly electrocuting his nerves. The pirates around them gave Ace an even wider circle, their eyes wide. When Ace finally released Teach, the man was highly shaken by the experience. Ace grabbed Teach's hair and hauled him up, displaying an almost inhuman amount of strength as Teach wasn't exactly what you would call light. See, I take particular offense to traitors who think nothing of killing their friends and family over something as stupid as power. And you happen to almost fatally wound someone I care about. Fortunately, your particular bounty is still good even if you're already dead when delivered, said Ace, his smile full of cold malice and a darkness that terrified anyone who saw it. So when you see whatever deity runs the afterlife, tell them that I send my best regards. The next light that hit Teach caused him to go limp. It was clear to anyone who looked at him that he was dead. No one was sure how Ace had done it, and they were wisely too terrified to ask someone who was clearly pissed off. On the plus side, Ace could claim the bounty for Teach's dead carcass without worry. After all, Dr. Pyrite was a neutral who didn't care at all about who he treated. If he just happened to deliver Teach and the man's crew to a Marine base for the bounty, well, clearly they had done something to piss him off. Not like the Marines were going to question why he killed a pirate with a bounty. He only managed to claim 2 others from Teach's crew, as the others wisely got the hell out of Dodge once they found out their captain was dead. On the plus side, Ace's reputation went up as someone you didn't want to mess with. On the other side of Jaya, Ace had a rather contemplative expression on his face, hearing about Nolan. He had heard the story, of course, but a thought occurred to him considering they hadn't found any evidence of the missing city despite diving for years. Isn't the knockback stream around this area? He asked. Yeah, it's due sometime tomorrow. Why? Asked Cricket. Has the stream ever come close to the island itself? It's gotten within a mile or so once, said Cricket. Is it possible that the missing city your ancestor saw was sent up to Skypiea? I mean, that particular sky island does tend visit this general area with some regularity, and it is a cloud-based island. What if the knockback stream hit the missing half of Jaya and it was sent up into the sky? Said Ace. You actually believe in Sky Island? Said Cricket, staring at him. Believe in it? I've been there a few times. They call us blue sea dwellers and they have wings on their back. I've traded planters of dirt for large amounts of food from them before, said Ace. I know there's a set route to visit them, but it's such a monumental pain in the ass to get up there. Seeing hope fill Cricket's face, Ace grinned. Hell, if we know where the place is, I could easily take you up to see it yourself, said Ace. It wouldn't be that hard to rig up the road to Dawn and fly up there, even if the air is thinner. Seeing the hope in Cricket's eyes and the two Surima brothers, Ace grinned. Far be it from me to help a man prove everyone wrong after years of ridicule, said Ace. Besides, if anyone deserves to see that city after years of your family being called a liar, it's you. Of course, this meant Ace wasn't planning to go up with Luffy. He had killed Blackbeard, and if he was going to take the other crews up to Skypiea, that would mean multiple trips with the road to Dawn. Besides, he had installed a special door on the ship that would allow him to continue having a relationship with Robin. It took anyone who went through it to straight to whatever ship Ace was on at the time, so long as the doorway could fit. Luffy didn't mind. As much as he loved having Ace around, he always felt like he should answer to his brother first rather than make the decisions himself. Besides, who was he to deny someone an adventure? Ace chuckled. Go have fun, Luffy. Just remember to call regularly. Okay, little brother. Luffy nodded. Unlike last time, he could part with his brother without making a complete fool of himself. Because this time, he was leaving with the knowledge Ace had acknowledged him as a true pirate captain, rather than just as his little brother. Though this time he left Robin and Luffy with a special key that would bring them to wherever Ace was. And back once they were put into a door with a lock. For Luffy it was a safety net in case Chopper or Finn weren't enough. But for Robin it was more along the lines of he found her highly attractive and didn't mind letting her pick his brain for information regarding the lost era. She found him just as attractive if the fact he kept waking up with her in his bed was any indication. It had been a while since he had a girlfriend. Chapter 16. Ace had to grin when he saw Luffy's shadow overlap on the clouds as the bell rang clearly from the sky. He made sure to take a few pictures to share with everyone. It'll take me a few trips to get everyone up there, but I have the feeling quite a few people are going to be happy to meet Nolan's decedent when we reach Skypiea. Cricket had always believed in Sky Island, but had never thought he would one day visit it without facing several life or death trials. After seeing the road to Dawn, excitement built up in his heart. The two Surima brothers would be joining them since he needed to make a few trips in order to carry their ships with them. The road to Dawn wasn't big enough for their entire crew, and it would only take a few minutes to deliver the ships. Ace grinned as the balloon easily carried them up past the cloud line and into the special cloud. Thanks to his powers, he could direct his balloon anywhere he liked while maintaining height. Cricket's eyes overflowed with emotion as he got his first look at Skypiea. It looked a little worse for wear, but the fact remained that there was no denying the Sky Island existed. I had a feeling this would happen. That idiot always seems to find trouble, said Ace amused. He sailed the ship towards the only area that had people on it, and to his amusement, Luffy was still there. Oi! Have you seen an idiot with a straw hat that eats way too much and wears a red vest? Ace called out. The people on the beach looked at each other. You know the guy who saved us? Said one man with tribal markings. He's my little brother. I was just curious if he made it up here or not, said Ace. They're still sleeping or exploring, another man replied. Figures. Is this Jaya? Asked Cricket. Who are you? Asked the first man. This is Monty Blanc Cricket, descendant of Monty Blanc Noland. Noland? Did you just say Noland? He asked, wide-eyed. Someone go get the leader, shouted another. If Cricket was overwhelmed with finally seeing the great city his ancestor had, it was nothing compared to meeting the descendant of the same man who had greeted Noland. Several centuries after Noland was chased off Jaya for helping the natives, their descendants had finally resolved the misunderstanding. Apparently the broken half of Jaya really had been sent up into the sky by the knock-up stream. A few more trips had the rest of the Surima alliance in the sky, along with their ships. Once Ace did a bit of trading, the locals gave their word to see Cricket and the two ships back to the Blue Sea safely. Ace, on the other hand, was checking on the Mary. That sort of trip could be hell on a ship. What he found had him frowning. Hey, who's there? Demanded Usopp, before he recognized Ace. How did you get up here? Hot air balloon. Cricket deserves to see El Dorado as much as anyone else, said Ace absently. Besides, I wanted to make sure you all made it up here safely before heading back to the Moby Dick. How's the Mary? It looks okay, but I think you need to give the poor ship a break, at least until you find a shipwright. Did someone attack the ship directly while you were up here? Yeah. Some jerk tried to burn it down. I suggest having Luffy talk with Mary to see if it wants to keep going or take a little break until it can be fixed up in Water 7. If he decides to bring out the Romance Dawn, I can fix it so that the Mary rests in a similar bottle until later. We aren't getting rid of the Mary, said Usopp angrily. Ace fixed a hard stare on the other man. I'm not suggesting you get rid of it. I'm saying that even a ship had a lifespan and this model was fairly old to begin with. It's a miracle it survived this far into the Grand Line without major damages. However, there's nothing that says you can't store the Mary and use it for quick supply runs once the crew gets a bit bigger. Better to delegate the ship to a minor role than to have it go to its final rest, said Ace flatly. Usopp deflated. Do we really have to? Usopp, I understand your love for the ship, so does the Mary. However, even love isn't enough to undo all the wear and tear on a ship, and eventually the crew will grow too big for the Mary. Besides, the Romance Dawn has a much bigger room for treasure. If you bring enough of it from here to the Blue Sea, you might be able to fix the Mary up good as new. Usopp was wavering, and eventually relented to the idea of switching the ships for a bit. He could live with the fact that the Mary wouldn't be given up for good, and could still be used for supply runs. Ace made a note to tell Luffy that he should probably leave the stand with the Mary in Usopp's room, so he could personally reassure himself that the ship was fine. Usopp likely had a close relationship with the person who gave them the merry-go in the first place. Everyone watched with avid fascination as Luffy uncorked the odd bottle he took from his room. There was a sort of reverse vacuum as something was sucked out of the bottle and onto the cloud sea in front of him. When it was over, a ship at least half a size bigger than the merry-go was sitting calmly. How? Said Nami in shock, her eyes wide. Magic. And a lot of blown-up bottles and sacrificial rowboats, said Ace. I had to specially make the bottle so that it would release the Romance Dawn and still be possible to use again later. All Luffy had to do was activate the runes and it would be sucked back into the bottle. Ace then produced a second bottle. Lou, this is for the merry-go. I think Usopp would be a good caretaker for it until you can get her fixed up to be the official supply run ship, said Ace. Luffy's eyes lit up with what Ace wasn't saying. Supply runs like fishing trips, right? Said Luffy cheerfully. Yup. Luffy handed the bottle to Usopp, who clutched it like a precious treasure. The sniper quickly painted the Straw Hat's flag onto the main sails, while Zoro ran up their old one onto the mast. Nami was already salivating because they could fit twice the amount of treasure onto the Romance Dawn, and the navigator room was fully stocked with quality supplies. Ace waved them off before calling Jack to take him back to the Moby Dick. He had completed his mission and he just wanted to crash in his own room with Luffy and the others. Luffy was already grinning like mad as they crashed back onto the Blue Sea. The crew was already examining the ship that Luffy had been keeping in storage since the beginning of their journey. Chopper and Finn had made themselves at home in the large medical bay, with Finn reclaiming his usual spot. Sanji was already in love with the kitchen, which was not only fully stocked but had brand new equipment and perfectly sterilized surfaces along with properly sharpened knives. There were even specialty dishes that were a pain to track down. Zoro had gravitated to the exercise room and had already found the special weights that made his own look like they were child's toys. They adjusted themselves to whatever the user wanted. There was even an armory that was half-stocked with weapons. There were a few swords there that had his interest that he wanted to look at later. Robin found the library and hadn't been seen since. Then again, most of the library on the Dawn were merely copies of the ones Ace had in his pocket dimension. Luffy had already picked up a few of his old favorites to reread again. Usopp was finding the best place to put the stand for the Mary. While he hated the fact they had to switch ships, he was happy they didn't have to give up the merry-go forever. He could live with it being a supply run ship which included fishing for more food. After all, Luffy was a black hole. With Ace. How did it go? Dr. Pyrite is now the proud owner of Blackbeard's bounty and 2 others, said Ace flatly. On an unrelated note, Luffy is doing good and I have a picture of his current crew. Did he suffer? Asked Whitebeard. I weakened him before I used a one-hit kill technique. As far as I know, he went quickly, said Ace. I do not tolerate traitors, especially snakes like Blackbeard. He's the sort of bastard who will only become more dangerous the longer he's left unchecked. Whitebeard looked tired. He was angry Teach had nearly killed Thatch and betrayed him like this, and resigned at the fact Ace had essentially executed him without hesitation. Are you okay? Asked Marco. Ace sighed. Just give me a week to center myself back on the ship and the crew that doesn't involve any killing. I should be fine. It's not the first time I've executed a dangerous traitor, and unfortunately I doubt it will be the last. Take whatever time you need, said Whitebeard. Ace wouldn't be back to normal for at least a week, but spending all that time with Luffy helped a lot. Usopp was unhappy, but at least the prognosis of the merry-go wasn't as bad as it could have been. Ace hadn't been joking that if they had kept using the ship, odds were that it wouldn't have lasted much longer. And despite his enthusiasm, Usopp wasn't a trained shipwright. At least they could still use the merry-go as a supply boat, which was better than nothing. The more worrying thing was that Robin was missing and the Straw Hat crew was being implicated in an attack on the mayor. Before the crew could attack whoever attempted to strip down the Romance Dawn, Luffy stopped them. Don't bother. Anyone stupid enough to attack a ship Ace personally customized is going to be outed pretty quick anyway. Besides, Ace is such a paranoid bastard that they're going to be regretting it pretty soon, said Luffy confidently. No one outdoes Ace when it comes to prank wards from hell. Prank wards? Repeated Nami. Luffy's expression was a tad odd. For him anyway. Let's just say that the Whitebeards learned very quickly not to instigate a prank war against him. There were entire sections of the Moby Dick declared off-limits for 2 full weeks last time. How big is that ship again? Asked Nami faintly. The Moby Dick is a massive ship and it's part of a trio, said Luffy confidently. I should know since Ace had me measure the dimensions of the ship for better prank placement and finding the best spots for a surprise attack using silly string and other items. His grin was wicked when he said that. I had a lot of fun during Ace's constant vigilance surprise attacks. Marco squawked really loud the last time we nailed him with a water balloon filled with whipped cream. Please tell me you aren't going to pull that on us later, said Nami, eyes wide. Not yet. Not until everyone gets up to speed on observation hockey, so I can get you all using it instinctively. Nothing inspires people to learn how to master it than surprise attacks and minor embarrassment from having things like syrup dropped on them at random, said Luffy. As one, Zoro, Sanji, and Usopp all looked at Nami. When we start observation hockey, you're going to have to step up, said Zoro flatly. Nami shuddered. Agreed, she said. If sleeping with the captain kept Luffy from getting bored and starting up something like that on them, then she'd happily do it. Besides, once he got into the swing of things, Luffy was a surprisingly skilled lover with a ton of stamina that she was going to put to good use. By the time they finally finished, Nami was ready to sleep for 2 days straight. Nami and the others found out the hard way what Luffy meant about the idiots regretting it when they saw what happened to them. Thank the gods Ace is on our side, said Nami, eyes wide. There were 3 chickens and 2 grown men in bright pink ballerina costumes. The chicken's skin was a bright fluorescent blue and the pink ballerinas could only speak in sonnets. It was pretty clear they were terrible at it. Just think, it would have been 10 times worse if they were attacking the ship with intent to kill or harm those on board, said Luffy. This is pretty low level compared to what he could have done.